Hey everybody, this is Russ from Metro Gamecore, and this here is the Anbernic RG503. I reviewed this a couple months ago, and I kinda had mixed review on it. There's a few things I liked about it. For example, I like the raised and bumpy back to it, and it also has some nice stereo sound. But I also felt that the device was too big to have inline shoulder and trigger buttons, and while the OLED display is very nice looking, the 16:9 aspect ratio is just not ideal for retro gaming. But the thing that bothered me the most about this device was something I wasn't expecting, and that was the fact that the buttons grind against the sides of the case. As you can see with this little amount of dust here along the sides of the buttons, it feels like they're just a little bit too big for the case. They make a very faint grinding sound as you push them down, and more often than not, they'll actually get stuck when you push down on them. And to me, that's an extremely frustrating experience and one of my least favorite things about some of these retro handhelds. And so in today's video, we're going to see if we can actually improve that experience a little bit. And to do that, we're going to use this silicone grease right here. Now this stuff is typically used on kitchen machinery. It basically will help lube things and make sure that plastic parts don't wear and tear over time. And it's available just directly on Amazon. As you can see here, I paid $8 for it. There are larger quantities, but I think the 1-ounce bottle is just perfect, and that's what I have here. And if you look on the bottle here, you can see different applications that it has, and it also has a temperature range of 40 to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. What that means is it'll actually work on the RG552 as well, because that device runs really hot. All kidding aside, this was recommended to me from people in the community who have used the same thing to basically improve the button experience. Now the only other tool you're going to need is a toothpick, and that's because you want to push the grease as close as you can to the entrance of the case. And so instead of getting it all over your fingers, we're going to use a little toothpick instead. Now first thing I want to do is remove some of that Cheeto dust that's around the sides of the buttons. And I'm just going to use a microfiber cloth here real quick just to kind of wipe it away. After that, the process is pretty simple. You literally will just take a toothpick and get a small little dab at the very tip of it. And I would recommend not using a lot. You can just start off with a small amount and you can always add a little bit more later on. From there, all you want to do is just kind of rub it around the sides of the button and try to push it as close to the case as you can. It's kind of hard to get perfect, but don't worry about it. We can clean it up with some paper towels here in a minute. Once you have some applied, just go ahead and start pushing on the button to kind of push that grease further down into the case. The idea here is we want to lubricate the space between the button and the hole so that way it glides a little bit more easily. And like I said, take your time, add a little bit and then just kind of keep going. And if you get a little bit more than you need, I recommend grabbing a paper towel and then wiping it off near the top of the button. Now, in my first application, I did feel a little bit of a difference, but I wanted to see what it was like if I added a little bit more. And so I kind of went nuts just to see what it was like if I put a lot in there and see whether or not that was worth it. But really what I ended up doing is just kind of wiping off more grease. So in this case, I think a little bit goes a long way. Either way, I'm not going to bore you with all the details here, but I recommend going through each of the buttons and doing the same thing. Even with a small 1-ounce tube like I have, I imagine it's going to last for several years. But yeah, I can already feel the difference between the lubricated button and the non-lubricated ones. But to be perfectly honest, the difference here is very subtle. But all the same, it's a tangible improvement from when it was grinding against the sides, at least for this device. For a comparison, let's try the Anbernic RG552. In my opinion, this one has perfect buttons. They feel really nice and super easy to press down on. And while the 503 is not quite there, it's definitely closer than it was before. So in that regard, I think this was a success. So I'm going to go ahead and add the grease to the rest of the buttons here. And same process, I'm going to go ahead and add them and then wipe off the excess if I have any. And then I'm just going to spend a few minutes pressing down on each of the buttons to make sure it's well lubricated. So far so good. Let's go ahead and start up a game here and see if it's actually tangibly different while playing a game. And yeah, I gotta say, it really is. For example, Celeste plays really well. And I would say this is one of my favorite tests with whether or not the buttons work perfectly. And I would say while the buttons aren't perfect, they are much more improved than they were just a few minutes ago. And so in that regard, I think this is $8 well spent already. Now, I do have a couple other devices that I would like to try this out on. Surprisingly, one of them is the Odin Pro. In my initial review, I did mention that I felt like these buttons were a little bit too tall, and it feels like the travel is just a little bit longer than it needs to be. These buttons also don't glide as smoothly as I would like, so let's try a little bit of this silicone grease and see if this helps it. And yeah, actually it does. The travel obviously is going to be the same, but it does feel like the buttons are a little bit lighter to press down on. In the end, I wish the buttons were just a little bit shorter, but this is an improvement. Another one I want to try is the version 1 of the Miyoo Mini. Now, the version 2 that's available right now has perfect buttons, but the version 1 grinded with both the buttons and the D-pad. So I'm just going to go ahead and lubricate this whole dang thing. And same story here, these buttons do feel a little bit better. Initially, these were so tight that they squeaked. And I would say by adding the silicone grease, maybe 90% of the squeakiness is now gone. Now again, for a comparison, let's try out a version 2 Miyoo Mini and see if the difference is the same. And I gotta say, the version 2 is so much better. So yes, the silicone grease will improve the button feel of the version 1, but it still doesn't hold a candle to the version 2. Alright everyone, that's really about it for this video. I just wanted to show what this grease was going to do to a couple different devices, and I will say probably the most important thing about it is that it turned the RG503 from something that I considered to be unplayable to a device that, yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to trying later. And also, custom firmware works on this device. Both ArcOS and Jealous are now available. And so if you have a device that has the same issue as me, where you have these grinding buttons, I do recommend the silicone grease. Either way, I hope this video was helpful for you, and let me know if you have any questions in the comments below. As always, thank you for watching, and be sure to like and subscribe if you found this helpful. And we will see you next time. Happy gaming.